They say the moment you meet your fated mate, the world stops turning. That time itself bends and fractures, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about destiny shatters like glass beneath your feet. I believed that once. I believed it with every fiber of my being when I was 17 years old, standing in ancient ruins under moonlight, watching Finn Blackwood look at me like I was the only star in his sky. But what they don't tell you is what happens when that same mate stands before you 3 years later, choosing duty over destiny, choosing comfort over courage, choosing everything except you. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the greatest betrayals come wrapped in the ribbons of honor and military necessity. And what they definitely don't tell you is that the moment you think you've lost everything, the most powerful alpha in 5 territories might just recognize you not as a broken female needing rescue, but as the warrior general his armies desperately need. This is my story, and I promise you it doesn't end the way you think. My name is Rowan Sinclair, and I was born under a blood moon in the Scottish Highlands to a pack that had seen better days. The Sinclair pack wasn't what it used to be. Once we'd been formidable, our territory stretching across 3 glens and 2 mountain ranges. But that was before the territorial wars, before the treaties, before my father made the decision that slowly bled our influence away like water through cupped hands. 10 years ago, Callahan Sinclair refused a dishonorable alliance with a rival pack. He chose integrity over advancement, honor over power. Our pack paid the price for his principles. By the time I turned 20, we were holding on to relevance by our fingernails. Everyone knew it. Everyone whispered it. And my father, war hero turned diminished alpha, carried that weight like stones in his pockets. I had an older sister, Seren. Beautiful, graceful Seren, with her copper hair that caught fire in the sunlight, and her laugh that sounded like wind chimes in summer. She was everything a pack daughter should be. Obedient, gentle, skilled in all the traditional ways. She could host a gathering with effortless charm, mediate disputes with wisdom beyond her years, and she never ever questioned our father's authority. I loved her. God help me, despite everything that happened, part of me still loves her. But we were never the same, Seren and I. Where she was fire and grace, I was storm and stubborn determination. I questioned everything. I trained harder than any of the males in our pack, pushing my body until my muscles screamed and my wolf howled for release. I studied strategy and history, devouring every book in our pack library about the old wars, the battles, the tactical decisions that had shaped our world. My father said I had too much spirit for a female. My mother Moira would smile sadly and tell me that spirit was a gift, but one that came with a price. I didn't understand what she meant then. I understand now. The training grounds of the Sinclair pack sat on a hillside overlooking 3 valleys, a strategic position my father had chosen decades ago when he still commanded respect across the territories. Dawn broke cold and sharp the morning everything began to unravel, the kind of crystalline autumn morning where your breath mists in the air and the world feels like it's holding its breath. I was 20 years old, moving through combat forms with a focus that had taken years to develop. Around me, a dozen male wolves watched with expressions ranging from grudging respect to outright resentment. I'd beaten most of them in fair combat at one point or another, and none of them knew quite what to do with a female who could anticipate their moves, counter their strikes, and put them on their backs in the dirt. The combat master, an older wolf named Garrett who'd served under my father in the territorial wars, circled me with the careful attention of a predator assessing prey. Except I wasn't prey. I never had been. Strike high, feint left, pivot, and sweep. The movements were instinct now, muscle memory built through thousands of hours of practice. Garrett came at me fast, testing, and I met him with a combination that would have shocked him 5 years ago. Now he just grunted approval and pressed harder. This was who I was. This was what I'd built in the aftermath of watching our pack's influence crumble. While other females learned to arrange flowers and manage households, I learned to read terrain, to understand supply lines, to think 3 moves ahead like the chess player my father had been before disappointment wore him down. Garrett finally called halt, breathing hard, and I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like pride. He'd been the one to teach me that strategy mattered more than strength, that a smaller fighter with superior tactics could defeat a larger opponent every single time. The other males dispersed, some muttering, some silent. I stood in the center of the training ground, catching my breath, watching the sun climb higher over the valley, and I felt the restlessness that had plagued me for months intensify. Like something was coming, like the world was about to shift beneath my feet. I didn't know how right I was. My father found me an hour later, cleaned up and studying tactical maps in the library. The Sinclair Manor was old stone and older pride, filled with the ghosts of better days. Maps covered one wall of the library, territorial boundaries marked in fading ink, battle sites from wars fought before I was born. Callahan Sinclair had been handsome once. You could still see it in the set of his shoulders, the sharp intelligence in his eyes. But worry had carved lines around his mouth, and his dark hair had gone silver at the temples. He carried himself like a man who'd lost something precious and never quite figured out how to live without it. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching me trace supply routes on a map from the last territorial conflict. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard in years. "We need to talk, Rowan. War Council. 20 minutes. Not a family meeting, a war council." The distinction mattered. It meant this was pack business, military business, the kind of discussion where my training and tactical knowledge might actually be valued instead of quietly resented. I followed him to the council room, a circular chamber at the heart of the manor where territorial decisions had been made for 3 generations. The table was scarred oak, marked with the burns and scratches of decades of heated debates. Garrett was already there, along with my mother and Seren, and 3 of our most senior wolves. The presence of my sister surprised me. Seren rarely attended war councils. Her gifts lay in other directions, and she'd never shown interest in military strategy. But she sat there in her customary grace, hands folded, face carefully neutral in a way that immediately raised my suspicions. My father didn't waste time on preamble. He spread a map across the table, and I recognized the territorial markers immediately. The Morrison clan, Eastern Territory, bordering our lands, led by an alpha named Thane Morrison, who'd been making aggressive moves for the past 2 years. "The situation is worse than we thought," Callahan said. "Morrison isn't just expanding. He's planning conquest, full military invasion of the neutral territories, including ours." Silence hit the room like a physical force. I leaned over the map, mind already racing through defensive possibilities, supply chain vulnerabilities, alliance options. "How solid is the intelligence?" I asked. "Solid enough." Garrett's voice was grim. "We've had scouts tracking their movements. Morrison is gathering forces. Estimate 2,500 warriors, maybe more. He's not hiding it anymore." 2,500. My stomach tightened. The Sinclair pack could field maybe 300 fighting wolves, and half of those were older veterans or young males barely past their first shift. We were outmatched 5-1, maybe worse. "We need allies," I said. "The Blackwood pack. They have the numbers, the training. If we could secure a military alliance—" "Already done." My father's words stopped me cold. "The Blackwood pack has offered alliance. Military support, 500 trained warriors to defend our territory." Relief flooded through me so fast it left me dizzy. 500 Blackwood warriors would change everything. We'd still be outnumbered, but the odds would be survivable. We could mount a real defense, maybe even— "There's a condition," Callahan continued, and something in his voice made my wolf stir uneasily beneath my skin. "The alliance requires a mating bond, a formal union between our packs." My heart started to pound. Political marriages weren't uncommon, but they'd fallen out of favor in recent decades. Most packs preferred strategic partnerships built on mutual benefit rather than forced bonds. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and we were definitely desperate. I thought about Finn Blackwood, 3rd son of the Blackwood Alpha. Thought about the mate bond that had snapped into place 3 years ago during interpack war games. Thought about 3 years of secret meetings, stolen moments, a relationship built on mutual respect as warriors, and the absolute certainty that we were meant for each other. Finn was decorated, a proven combat leader despite being a 3rd son. If his father was offering alliance through marriage, surely he'd agreed to make our bond public. Surely after 3 years of secrecy, we could finally— "They want Seren." The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, registered the sounds, but my brain refused to process the meaning. I looked at my father, then at my sister. Serene's face was pale but composed, and I saw it then. The resignation, the acceptance. She already knew. "I don't understand," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "The Blackwood pack wants Seren to marry Finn Blackwood." my father finished. "It's already been negotiated. The contracts are being drawn up. The ceremony will take place in 6 weeks, under the blood moon." The room tilted. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My wolf was howling, clawing, desperate to burst free and run to Finn, to demand answers, to make sense of this impossible nightmare. But I sat frozen, watching my sister's face, searching for any sign of distress, any indication that she would refuse. What I saw there chilled me to my bones. Guilt, yes. Sorrow, but also duty. She was going to do it. She was going to marry him. The mate bond between Finn and me pulsed with sudden pain, a reminder of everything we'd shared, every whispered promise under starlight, every moment of perfect understanding in combat when we'd moved as one, every dream of a future where we could finally stop hiding, finally be together openly. All of it crumbling to ash. "I need to be excused," I managed, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake tearing through my soul. "Rowan," my father started, but I was already moving, already standing, already walking toward the door with careful, measured steps, because if I moved too fast, I would break, and I refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me shatter. The forest called to me like it always did when the walls of civilization became too suffocating. I made it to the tree line before the first sob tore from my throat. I made it another 100 yards before my knees buckled. And I made it to the old ruins where Finn and I had first met before I finally let myself scream. The ruins were ancient, predating even the oldest pack records. Stone columns reached toward the sky like broken fingers, covered in moss and time. This was where the mate bond had snapped into place 3 years ago. I'd been 17, fierce and convinced of my own invincibility. He'd been 20, a decorated young warrior with kind eyes and a respect for my strength that felt revolutionary. We'd been sparring. The war games brought together young wolves from different packs, testing combat skills and tactical thinking. I'd volunteered despite my father's reservations, determined to prove myself against fighters who didn't know me, who wouldn't pull their punches because I was female. Finn had been my final opponent of the day. He fought smart, not just strong, and for the first time in years, I'd faced someone who truly challenged me. We'd circled each other in the ruins, both breathing hard, both grinning with the pure joy of finding an equal match. And then our eyes had met, and the world had stopped. The mate bond hit like lightning, like recognition, like coming home to a place you didn't know you'd been searching for your entire life. One moment I was a warrior in combat. The next I was staring at my destiny made flesh, and he was staring back at me with the same shock and wonder and absolute certainty. We'd talked for hours that night after the games ended, about strategy and honor, about the weight of expectations and the frustration of being underestimated, about dreams of leading warriors into battle side by side, partners in every sense of the word. He'd understood me, seen me, valued the very qualities that made me difficult and inconvenient and too much for everyone else, or so I'd thought. I found him at the monument to fallen warriors, a stone marker on the border between Sinclair and Blackwood territory. It was neutral ground, a place where we'd met dozens of times over the past 3 years. Sunset painted the sky in shades of blood and gold, and Finn stood with his back to me, shoulders tense in a way that told me he knew I was coming. "Explain," I said. My voice was ice. My wolf was barely contained beneath my skin. He turned slowly, and I saw everything I needed to know in his face before he even opened his mouth. Guilt, regret, but underneath it all, resignation. He'd made his choice, and it wasn't me. "My father found out about us," he said quietly. "About the bond. He didn't approve," I finished. "Because I'm too wild, too strong, too unwilling to be the obedient little mate his military legacy demands?" Finn flinched, but he didn't deny it. "Rowan, you have to understand. War is coming. Morrison is gathering forces for full invasion. I need my father's support to lead troops. I need access to resources, to strategy councils, to everything that matters more than me." The words hung between us like a blade. He reached for me and I stepped back, wolf snarling just beneath the surface. "You're the most brilliant tactical mind I've ever encountered," Finn said, and I heard real pain in his voice. "You could lead armies, but that's exactly the problem. My father needs obedient mates for his sons, not warrior partners who question orders. The Blackwood legacy is built on traditional structures. Females support from behind. They don't fight on the front lines. So you're choosing your father's approval over our mate bond. I'm choosing my battalion over one person." He met my eyes, and I saw the steel beneath the regret. If I'm disowned, I can't lead, can't fight, can't protect anyone. 500 warriors depend on me for leadership. I can't abandon them for me, I finished. You can't choose me over 500 soldiers and your family legacy. I'm sorry, Rowan. His voice broke. I never wanted to hurt you. But not sorry enough to fight for us. Not brave enough to choose love over duty. Not strong enough to stand up to your father and demand he accept your true mate. I looked at him, this male I'd loved for 3 years, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The mate bond was still there, still connecting us, but it felt different now, tainted, broken at the edges. You're going to reject the bond, I said. It wasn't a question. Finn's silence was answer enough. The formal rejection would come later in private, but we both knew it was inevitable. He would speak the ritual words, the bond would fray and tear, and he would walk away to marry my sister and secure his precious alliance. I want you to know something, I said, and my voice was steady now, clear and cold as winter ice. A warrior who abandons their mate is no warrior at all. You talk about duty and honor, but there's no honor in cowardice, no duty in choosing the easy path. You had a chance to stand for something real, something rare, something worth fighting for, and you chose comfort instead. I turned and walked away before he could respond, before he could see the tears finally spilling down my face, before he could witness the exact moment my heart finished breaking. Behind me, I felt the bond pulse with pain, but I didn't look back. Warriors didn't look back. 3 months of torture followed. 3 months of watching Seren prepare for a wedding to my mate. 3 months of pack females gushing about the dress, the ceremony, the honor of such an alliance. 3 months of biting my tongue until it bled and pretending I was fine when every breath felt like walking through fire. Seren tried to talk to me once. She came to my room late one night, tears streaming down her face, telling me she'd begged Father to refuse the arrangement, that she'd tried everything she could think of, that she never wanted to hurt me. But in the end, she'd accepted it, because that's what dutiful daughters did. Pack before self, collective survival over individual happiness, sacrifice without complaint. I forgave her, even though the words tasted like ash in my mouth, because she was my sister, because she was a victim of this too, just in a different way, because hating her wouldn't change anything. But I couldn't forgive Finn. Every time I saw him during the pre-wedding gatherings, every time our eyes met across a room, I felt the ghost of our bond aching like a phantom limb. He'd rejected me formally 2 weeks after that conversation at the monument, speaking the ritual words that should have severed our connection completely. But the bond didn't just disappear. It couldn't be fully broken until he completed a mating with someone else. So I lived in awful limbo, connected to someone who'd chosen to throw me away, counting down the days until the blood moon when that final connection would be cut. Except the world had other plans. The Morrison clan chose those 3 months to escalate their aggression. Border raids increased. Scout parties probed our defenses. Twice, warriors died defending territory that had been peaceful for decades. I volunteered for every dangerous patrol, threw myself into combat with a recklessness that worried my father and terrified my mother. I was trying to die honorably, I think, trying to find purpose in protecting the pack when everything else felt meaningless. Instead, I found something else. I found that I was good at war. During a raid on our eastern border, I'd led a counterattack that saved a dozen lives, organized untrained civilians into a defensive formation, read the enemy's tactical approach, and countered it with moves they didn't expect. We'd won that engagement with minimal casualties, and afterward, Garrett had looked at me with something like awe. "You have your father's gift for strategy," he'd said. "Maybe better. You see patterns the rest of us miss." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow, because the person I most wanted to share it with, the warrior who would have understood the tactical beauty of that defensive coordination, was planning to marry my sister in 2 weeks. The day of the wedding dawned cold and clear, autumn air sharp enough to hurt my lungs. I'd barely slept, my wolf pacing restlessly beneath my skin, some instinct screaming that something was wrong, something beyond the obvious nightmare of watching my mate bond with another. The ceremony was being held at the sacred clearing, neutral ground that had hosted pack celebrations and rituals for centuries. But it was also strategic high ground, defensible position with sight lines across 3 valleys. My tactical mind noted this even as my heart tried to crawl out of my chest. Both the Sinclair and Blackwood packs were in attendance, along with representatives from a dozen other territories. It was more than just a wedding. It was a political statement, a public alliance, a signal to Morrison that we were united. Except we weren't. Not really. We were desperate and scared and making bargains we'd have refused in better times. The clearing had been transformed. Hundreds of candles flickered in the gathering twilight. Ribbons hung from every tree branch. Flowers I couldn't name created archways and borders, their scent heavy in the still air. At the center stood the ritual circle, marked in salt and ash, where Finn and Saren would speak their vows under the blood moon's witness. I took my place near the front as Saren's honor attendant, a role I'd tried to refuse and been overruled on. Around me, hundreds of wolves gathered in their finest ceremonial dress, the air buzzing with anticipation and political calculation. My father stood with the other alphas, his face carefully neutral. My mother kept touching her hair nervously, aware that eyes would judge our family today, and I stood in my ceremonial dress, warrior braids hidden beneath traditional styling, feeling like I was watching my own execution. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire. The ceremony began. Finn entered first, flanked by his brothers, looking devastating in Highland formal wear. For one brief moment, our eyes met across the distance, and I saw everything he felt reflected in those familiar depths. Regret, grief, the knowledge of what he was losing, but not enough, never enough to actually change anything. Then came Saren, and despite everything, I had to admit she was beautiful. Her copper hair was woven with autumn flowers. Her dress flowed like water. She looked like something from a legend, a princess stepping into her destiny. Except it was my destiny she was stepping into. My mate she was about to claim. My future she was stealing with her dutiful compliance. The officiant began the traditional words. Speaking of bonds and fate, of two souls joining to create something stronger than either could be alone. I wanted to scream, wanted to shift and run until my paws bled, wanted anything except to stand here and witness this travesty. My hands clenched into fists, so tight my nails drew blood. Small crescents of pain that kept me grounded, kept me present when all I wanted was to disappear. Finn and Saren spoke their vows, exchanged the ceremonial knife, made small cuts on their palms and pressed their hands together, mingling blood in the ancient way of sealing bonds. The blood moon began to rise, huge and red on the horizon. Everyone held their breath. This was the moment when the moon would witness and bless their union, when the bond between Finn and me would finally, irrevocably break, when a new bond would form between him and my sister. I braced myself for the pain, for the tearing sensation I knew was coming. I would not cry out, would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break, would endure this with dignity if it killed me. But I'd forgotten something crucial. I'd forgotten that I was a warrior, that I'd spent 3 months in combat, that my tactical instincts had been honed sharp as blades, and my tactical instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The perimeter security was weak, too weak for a gathering this important. The guards were positioned incorrectly, leaving gaps in coverage. The tree line was too close, providing cover for anyone who wanted to approach unseen. And there, in the shadows between the ancient oaks, something moved that didn't belong. I opened my mouth to shout a warning just as the blood moon crested the trees and the world exploded into chaos. Morrison warriors poured from the forest like a dark tide, dozens of them, maybe more, howling their battle cry as they charged into the clearing. Civilians screamed, males shifted, rushing to defend their families. The carefully orchestrated ceremony dissolved into panic and violence in the space between heartbeats. I didn't hesitate, didn't freeze, didn't waste time on shock or fear. 3 months of dangerous patrols had honed my combat instincts to razor sharpness. I shifted mid-stride, my ceremonial dress shredding away as my wolf burst free, and I threw myself into the fight. A Morrison warrior lunged for a group of fleeing children. I hit him from the side, jaws closing on his throat, momentum carrying us both to the ground. He went down thrashing. I was already moving, already targeting the next threat. Around me, chaos. But I could see patterns in the chaos. Could read the flow of battle like I read strategic maps. Morrison was attacking from 3 directions, trying to scatter the defenders, create panic. Classic shock tactics. Effective against unprepared opponents. But I wasn't unprepared. My mind was already 3 moves ahead, already calculating defensive positions, rally points, optimal use of terrain. Garrett, I projected through the pack bond. East flank, defensive line, civilians to the center, fighting males form perimeter. I didn't know if he could hear me through the chaos. Didn't know if anyone would listen to a 20-year-old female giving orders in the middle of an ambush. But then I felt the pack structure shift, felt males responding to my directions, and hope sparked bright in my chest. We could win this. We were outnumbered, but we had home ground advantage. We had the high ground. We had... A massive dark wolf appeared in my peripheral vision, and for a split second I thought it was another Morrison warrior. Then I caught his scent. Pine and snow and something wild and ancient that made every hair on my body stand straight up. Not Morrison, something else, someone else. The dark wolf moved like death incarnate, like violence given form and purpose. He tore through Morrison warriors with efficiency that spoke of decades of combat experience. And he was protecting the fleeing civilians, placing himself between them and danger without hesitation. I didn't have time to wonder who he was or why he was here. A Morrison female lunged for me, and I met her teeth to teeth, warrior to warrior. We rolled across blood-soaked ground, snapping and clawing. She was good, experienced. But I was faster, and I'd spent 3 months embracing death with open arms. I won. She didn't get back up. The battle raged for 8 minutes that felt like hours. 8 minutes of tooth and claw and desperate violence. 8 minutes where I forgot about broken hearts and stolen mates and focused entirely on the purity of survival. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Morrison forces melted back into the forest, their shock attack blunted by unexpectedly organized resistance. They left bodies behind. We had bodies too, but we'd survived. We'd held. I stood in the center of the clearing, blood-soaked and breathing hard, and became aware of absolute silence. Every eye was on me. Every person in that sacred space was staring at the young female who'd taken command during crisis, who'd organized defense against impossible odds. And then I felt it, that strange, wild scent intensifying. I turned, still in wolf form, and found the massive dark wolf standing 20 feet away. His silver eyes were locked on me with an intensity that made my heart stutter. He shifted, bones realigning, fur receding, and where the wolf had been stood a man. The largest male I'd ever seen, broad-shouldered and radiating authority that pressed against my skin like physical force. His hair was dark as raven wings, worn long enough to brush his shoulders. His face was all hard angles and old scars. And his eyes, God, his eyes were silver, pale and bright and ancient. He was naked, as shifters always were after transformation, but he wore it like armor, like his body was simply another weapon in his considerable arsenal. Blood covered him, enemy blood, and he looked like some ancient war god stepped out of legend. I knew who he was before anyone spoke his name. Everyone knew. Magnus Ashford, the alpha of alphas, the wolf who ruled 5 territories with iron discipline and unwavering purpose. He hadn't been seen in the lower territories in 5 years, and certainly no one had invited him to this wedding. He had no connection to Sinclair or Blackwood, no reason to be here, no explanation for his presence. Except he was staring at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. The crowd remained frozen. Even the wounded held their breath. In my peripheral vision I could see my father, pale and shocked. Could see Finn standing abandoned in the ritual circle, blood still dripping from his palm. Could see Seren with her eyes wide. But I couldn't look away from Magnus Ashford as he crossed the space between us with the confidence of a male who'd never been denied anything in his life. He stopped 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could smell him properly now. Pine and snow and wild places. Close enough that I could see the silver in his eyes wasn't just color, but depth. Layers upon layers of intelligence and experience, and something fierce that called to my wolf. And then he did something that sent a ripple of shock through every person present. Magnus Ashford, alpha of alphas, ruler of 5 territories, the most powerful wolf in the entire North, bent his knee before me. Not submission. A warrior's salute. Respect from one fighter to another. But also something more. Something that made the blood moon's light seem to intensify, focusing on both of us like a spotlight from heaven itself. I claim you as my mate before the blood moon and the assembled packs. His voice carried to every corner of the clearing, deep and certain and absolutely serious. Rowan Sinclair, daughter of Callahan and Moira. You are mine as I am yours. But more than that, I claim you as my fellow general. I've commanded armies for 17 years, and I've never seen defensive coordination like yours. You organized untrained civilians into fighting force in 90 seconds. You read battlefield patterns like breathing. The moon showed me your face in my dreams 5 years ago, and I've been searching every territory looking for you, not just searching for my mate, but searching for the tactical mind my territories desperately need. I was still in wolf form, still processing, still trying to make sense of impossible words from an impossible source. This couldn't be happening. The mate bond with Finn was still there, frayed and dying but present. You didn't get two mates. The moon didn't make mistakes and then correct them. Except as Magnus raised his head and met my eyes again, I felt it. The snap of connection, the surge of recognition, the absolute certainty that this male, this alpha, this warrior was mine in a way that transcended everything I thought I knew about fate and destiny. The bond with Finn had been a candle flame, warm and bright and beautiful, but ultimately fragile. This was a wildfire. This was the sun. This was power and partnership and 1,000 other things I had no name for. I shifted back to human form, standing naked and blood-covered in the center of the clearing, and I didn't care. Modesty seemed absurd in this moment. Everything seemed absurd except the silver-eyed alpha kneeling before me. "That's not possible," someone said. "My father," his voice thin with shock. "She already had a mate. The bond was rejected. You can't—" "The bond was false," Magnus interrupted, still not looking away from me. "Not complete. A connection, yes, but not the true mate bond. I know this because I have carried the mark of my true mate for 5 years, seeing her face in dreams, feeling her presence like a compass pointing north. And she is here. She is real." He paused, and something softened in those silver eyes. "If she will have me." "Morrison is coming," he continued, addressing me now. "Only me. Full invasion in 6 weeks. 2,000 warriors, maybe more. They're planning to conquer every neutral territory and install Thane Morrison as Supreme Alpha. I've been tracking their war plans for months. Came here tonight to warn your packs. Arrived just as the attack started." He stood in one fluid motion, offered his hand. Not romantic. Military. "I'm not asking you to be an obedient mate who stands behind me looking decorative. I'm asking you to be my war general. Morrison has numbers. I have 5 territory armies but no unified strategy. You have the tactical mind I've been searching for, the defensive brilliance I need. Marry me, yes. But first, help me save these territories from conquest." The clearing was so silent I could hear the candle flames flickering in the wind. Every eye was on us, witnessing this moment, this impossible reversal. I looked at Finn. He stood frozen in the ritual circle, the wedding ceremony abandoned, his face white with shock. He'd rejected me because I was too strong, too tactical, too much warrior to fit his father's narrow definition of appropriate mate. And now the most powerful alpha alive was offering me everything: partnership, purpose, equal command. I looked at my father. Pride and hope warred in his expression. His daughter, the one everyone said had too much spirit, was being claimed by the alpha of alphas, not despite her strength, but because of it. I looked at Magnus, this impossible male who'd crashed into my life like a force of nature, who'd fought beside me without hesitation, who was offering respect and partnership instead of demanding submission. "Why me?" I asked, and my voice was steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "You have experienced generals. Why a 20-year-old female from a failing pack?" "Because experienced generals think like conquerors," Magnus said simply. "You think like a protector. That defensive coordination wasn't about glory or advancement. It was about saving lives. That's what we need. Someone who fights to protect, not to dominate. Someone brilliant enough to outthink Morrison and honorable enough to remember why we're fighting." He held my eyes. "Plus, you're my fated mate. That tends to be relevant." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Almost. I'll help you win the war. Then we discuss everything else." "Warrior to the core," he said, and approval radiated from him like heat. "Perfect." His expression shifted, became more serious. "But you should know, Morrison is planning full invasion in 42 days. We have 6 weeks to unite 5 territories, train armies, and prepare defense. Starting now, if you accept command." The scope of it hit me. 6 weeks. 42 days to prepare for a war that could destroy everything. Thousands of lives depending on tactical decisions, impossible odds, desperate stakes. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something wake up inside my chest. Purpose. Real purpose. Not just surviving heartbreak, but actively building something, protecting something, leading something. I accept, I said, on one condition. My strategy, my way. You don't override me. I wouldn't dream of it, General, Magnus said. And I heard absolute sincerity in those words. He turned to address the crowd, and his voice carried the weight of alpha authority that made even other pack leaders unconsciously bow their heads. I declare before the blood moon and assembled witnesses, Rowan Sinclair is my fated mate and my appointed general of territorial defense. The Sinclair pack is under my direct protection. Any pack that harms them answers to me personally. He looked at my father. Callahan Sinclair, I request your blessing to court your daughter, though I will court her with or without it. I prefer your approval and goodwill, but I will not allow anyone to stand between me and my mate, not even her father. My father looked like he was trying to swallow something large and difficult. Finally, he managed a stiff nod. You have my blessing, Alpha Ashford. It would be an honor for our pack. The honor is mine, Magnus said. Then he looked at Finn, who still stood in the ritual circle with Seren. But make no mistake, this alliance you sought through marriage is dissolved. The contracts are void. Any pack that questions this will face me in formal challenge. I welcome all challengers. No one spoke. No one moved. The offer of formal combat hung in the air, deadly serious. But everyone knew Magnus Ashford had won his position through 12 years of undefeated challenges. No one was fool enough to face him. The blood moon hung above us, still shining, and its light fell on Magnus and me like a blessing, like confirmation, like the universe finally correcting a mistake it had made 3 years ago when it showed me the wrong face and called it destiny. I stood there, naked and blood-covered and absolutely certain for the first time in 3 months. This was right. This was real. This was the warrior partnership I dreamed of but never dared believe existed. Finn tried to approach me once, took a single step in my direction, mouth opening like he wanted to apologize or explain or reclaim something he'd thrown away. Magnus moved, not threatening, just positioning himself between us, a wall of muscle and authority that made Finn stop in his tracks. You rejected her, Magnus said quietly, and that soft tone was somehow more terrifying than any shout. You had the moon's favor and you threw it away for politics and comfort. You chose duty over destiny and broke something precious. Do not compound your cowardice by attempting to interfere now. He addressed the entire clearing without taking his attention from Finn. Let me be clear. Rowan Sinclair is my mate and my general. Any wolf who disputes this, who attempts to interfere with this bond, who makes any claim upon her, will answer to me personally. And I promise, that is not a conversation anyone here wishes to have. Finn backed away, returning to where Seren stood frozen. The interrupted ceremony, the abandoned vows, the alliance that would never be. I should have felt something watching him retreat. Vindication, maybe, or satisfaction. But I felt nothing where he was concerned. That chapter was closed. That version of myself was dead. Magnus turned back to me, and the hardness melted from his expression. I apologize for the display of aggression in your presence, but I will not allow anyone to threaten or distress you. Not now, not ever. You have been hurt enough. We need to talk, I said. Properly, away from all these eyes. He nodded immediately. Of course. Your preference. Your pace. I'm here to fight beside you, not pressure you. Someone brought us clothes. We dressed quickly, practically, neither of us caring about ceremony anymore. And then Magnus offered his hand and I took it, and we walked away from that sacred clearing where everything had changed. Behind us, chaos erupted as people tried to process what had just happened. Political alliances shifting, territory dynamics realigning, the social order rearranging itself around this new reality. But I didn't look back. Warriors never looked back. We walked to the old ruins where Finn and I had first met, and I didn't know why I led Magnus there until we arrived. Maybe I needed to replace that memory. Maybe I needed to claim this place for something new. The blood moon hung overhead, painting everything in shades of crimson. Magnus stood among the broken columns, patient and still, waiting for me to speak first. I need you to understand something, I said. 3 months ago my mate rejected me, chose his family's approval over our bond. I survived it, barely, built myself back into something functional through combat and purpose. But I'm not whole yet. I'm not healed. And I can't be your mate, your general, your anything if I'm just running from pain instead of choosing you because you're right. I know, Magnus said simply. I felt your pain through the dreams, felt you dimming. That's why I had to find you, not to rescue you, because you're clearly capable of saving yourself, but to offer you what that fool couldn't. Real partnership, real respect, real recognition of who and what you are. He moved closer, silver eyes intense in the moonlight. You asked why you. I'll tell you exactly why. Because the moon showed me a warrior female who could outthink experienced generals, who valued life over glory, who had the courage to lead from the front and the wisdom to protect from behind. I've been searching for you for 5 years, Rowan. Not just searching for my mate, but searching for the partner my territories need, someone who can think strategically while caring deeply, someone brilliant and fierce and absolutely unwilling to accept less than they deserve. What do you want from me? I whispered. Everything, he said honestly. Your tactical mind, your warrior's heart, your partnership in rebuilding territorial defense. Your trust, earned slowly over time. Your presence beside me as we face impossible odds. And eventually, if I'm blessed beyond measure, your love. But I'll take whatever you're willing to give, at whatever pace you need. I have 42 days to prepare for war, I said. I can't afford to be distracted by romance or politics or— Then we focus on war, Magnus interrupted. You're my general first. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Just like that? Just like that. His smile was slight, but genuine. I've waited 5 years. I can wait a bit longer for you to be ready for more than military partnership. I looked at him, this impossible alpha who'd appeared like destiny incarnate, who offered everything I'd needed and nothing I didn't want, who saw my strength as asset instead of threat. The mate bond hummed between us, not demanding completion, just existing, waiting patiently for me to accept what my soul already knew. I need to know you're serious about the general position, I said. This isn't just pretty words to court me. If I accept military command, you follow my strategic decisions even when they're risky, even when they scare you, even when your instinct is to protect me instead of trust me. I give you my word as alpha of alphas, Magnus said formally. Your strategy, your way. I'll advise, discuss, argue if I disagree. But final military decisions are yours. I've led armies 17 years. I know brilliant tactical thinking when I see it. And you, Rowan Sinclair, are brilliant. Then I accept, I said. All of it. The general position, the courtship, the mate bond, when I'm ready to complete it. But right now, tonight, I accept the partnership, the purpose, the fight. Relief and fierce joy transformed his face. He pulled me close, carefully, giving me every chance to pull away. When I didn't, when I leaned into him instead, he wrapped his arms around me and held me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. We have 6 weeks to save 5 territories, he murmured against my hair. Impossible odds, desperate stakes, lives depending on decisions we haven't made yet. Good, I said and meant it. I need impossible right now, need purpose bigger than heartbreak, need reason to keep fighting. Then fight beside me, Magnus said. Lead my armies. Show Morrison what real tactical brilliance looks like, and when the war is won, we'll figure out everything else. Deal, I whispered. The blood moon shone down on us, blessing this new bond, this warrior partnership, this impossible reversal of fate. And for the first time in 3 months, I felt something like hope. The war was coming, but I wasn't facing it alone anymore. I had purpose. I had partnership. I had a future worth fighting for. And I had a male who saw my strength as exactly what it was, my greatest gift, not my deepest flaw. This story was just beginning, and I promised myself it would end on my terms, with my choices, with my strength finally recognized for what it truly was. Worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth everything. The fortress at Central Highlands rose from the mountain like it had grown there, stone and iron and centuries of strategic purpose. Magnus's seat of power wasn't designed for beauty. It was designed for war. Thick walls that could withstand siege, ramparts positioned for optimal defensive fire, supply stores that could feed an army for months. Everything about it spoke of a male who understood that true strength came from preparation, not posturing. I arrived at dawn the day after the blood moon ceremony, riding hard with Garrett and a small escort of Sinclair warriors. My father had wanted to come to negotiate terms, to ensure his daughter wasn't walking into some political trap. I'd refused. This was military business, and I needed to establish myself as general, not as someone's protected daughter. Magnus met us at the gates personally. Still covered in yesterday's blood, he looked like he hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. Neither had I. We'd spent the night in separate strategy sessions, him coordinating responses to the Morrison attack, me analyzing what that assault revealed about their capabilities and intentions. "General Sinclair," he greeted me formally, and I caught the slight smile at the corner of his mouth. "Welcome to Central Highlands. Your war room is ready." My war room. Not his war room that I'd be allowed to use. Mine. The distinction mattered, and he knew it. The fortress interior was all function over form, stone corridors worn smooth by generations of boots, weapon racks at strategic intervals, maps covering every available wall. This was a place built by warriors for warriors, and something in my chest loosened seeing it. He led me to a circular chamber at the fortress heart, the war room. A massive oak table dominated the center, scarred and stained from decades of planning. Maps covered the walls, some ancient, some recent. Terrain models occupied one corner, supply manifests another, and standing around that table were 4 males and 1 female, all wearing the hard expressions of experienced commanders. My new officer corps, the wolves who'd led territorial defenses for years, the veterans who'd won battles before I was born, and now they were supposed to take orders from a 20-year-old female from a failing pack. This would be interesting. Magnus made introductions with military efficiency. Commander Barrett from Northern Territory. I knew him by reputation. 65 years old, veteran of the Great Territorial Wars, respected across all packs for tactical brilliance and absolute integrity. He met my eyes and nodded once, no judgment, just assessment. Commander Lydia Chen from Western Coast, the only other female in command position. 42, sharp as broken glass, with a reputation for logistics mastery that bordered on supernatural. She looked at me with something between curiosity and solidarity. Commander James Cross from Southern Plains, 58, traditional as stone, arms crossed over his chest in posture that screamed skepticism. This was the one who'd fight me hardest. Commander Darius Morrison from Eastern Forests, younger than the others, maybe 30, and the shock of seeing Morrison as a surname made my wolf bristle until Magnus explained quietly. Darius defected 2 years ago, disagreed with his brother Thane's conquest plans. He's proven his loyalty 100 times over. Darius met my eyes with something like desperation, like he needed me to believe him, to trust him, to not judge him for his brother's crimes. And finally, Garrett from my own territory, the combat master who'd trained me since childhood. His presence steadied something in my chest. At least one familiar face in this room of strangers. Magnus gestured to the table. "General Sinclair has strategic command of our combined defensive forces. I've seen her tactical coordination under fire. She organized untrained civilians into effective defense in under 2 minutes during yesterday's attack. She reads battlefield patterns like breathing. You will question her strategy when you disagree. You will argue. You will offer alternative approaches. But you will remember that final decisions are hers, and you will execute those decisions with absolute precision. Am I understood?" The commanders exchanged glances. Cross looked like he'd swallowed glass. Barrett looked thoughtful. Lydia looked intrigued. Darius looked hopeful. Garrett looked proud. "Show us," Cross said flatly. "You want command? Show us you deserve it." "Fair enough." I moved to the main map, mind already sorting through everything I'd observed in yesterday's attack. Morrison hit us with shock tactics. 3-direction assault designed to scatter defenders and create panic. Classic opening move for someone testing response capabilities. I traced the attack pattern with my finger. They committed maybe 50 warriors, lost a third of them. That's unacceptable casualty ratio for a probing attack, which tells us they weren't expecting organized resistance. They thought we'd panic and break. "But we didn't," Barrett said quietly. "Because someone organized us," Lydia added, looking at me with new interest. I nodded. Now Morrison knows we're not easy prey. They'll adjust tactics. Expect siege strategy next. Surround and starve instead of direct assault. They have the numbers for it. 2,500 warriors, maybe more. I pulled out the terrain maps, spreading them across the table. But siege only works if we're trapped. Morrison is thinking conquest. We need to think protection. Not just defending fortress walls, but defending territories, supply lines, civilian populations. My hands moved across the maps, years of study translating into tactical vision. 3-tier defense, outer skirmish line here, here, and here. Mobile units that harass and retreat, bleed their numbers, slow their advance. Middle defensive positions at these choke points. Fortified, supplied, able to hold against superior numbers. And inner fortress as final fallback, but only for non-combatants. Fighting forces stay mobile, stay flexible. Cross leaned forward despite himself. Supply lines? I'd already thought of that. Showed him the routes I'd mapped. Hidden caches here and here. Redundant supply paths so cutting one doesn't starve us. Lydia, I need your logistics expertise to make this viable. She smiled, sharp and approving. You'll have it. What about Morrison's supply lines? Darius asked quietly. I looked at him. You tell me. You know your brother's methods. The room went silent. Everyone watching to see how I'd handle the defector, the male whose brother was our enemy. Darius held my gaze. Thane overextends. Always has. He'll push his forces hard and fast, counting on terror and momentum. But he's bad at logistics, assumes victory will come quick enough that supply doesn't matter. So we make it matter, I said. We don't just defend. We target his supply trains, force him to defend his rear while pushing forward, stretch his forces thin. That's aggressive, Cross said. But he didn't sound disapproving anymore. Risky for defensive strategy. Defense doesn't mean passive, I countered. It means protecting what matters while making the enemy pay for every inch they take. We can't match Morrison's numbers, so we match their aggression and exceed their intelligence. Barrett laughed, sudden and genuine. You do have your father's gift. Better, maybe. Callahan Sinclair fought 3 major engagements in the territorial wars. Won all 3 through exactly this kind of thinking. Aggressive defense. Make them bleed for every victory until victory becomes too expensive. I felt a flush of pride at the comparison, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about ego. This was about survival. We have 41 days, I said. I need full troop assessments from each territory. Numbers, training levels, equipment status. I need terrain surveys of every potential battlefield. I need intelligence on Morrison movements, updated daily. And I need training protocols established immediately. We're going to drill these forces until they can execute complex maneuvers in their sleep. Lydia was already taking notes. Barrett nodded approval. Even Cross looked grudgingly impressed. Darius watched me with something like hope lighting his face. One more thing, I added. I'm not commanding from the safety of this fortress. I lead from the front. I need to see the territories, assess defenses personally, meet the troops I'm asking to risk their lives. Magnus, who'd been silent through the whole presentation, spoke quietly. That's dangerous. Morrison has already shown they'll attack without warning. I know. I met his eyes. That's why you're coming with me. Your presence sends message that we're united. Plus, you fight like death incarnate. I want that on my side. Something blazed in his silver eyes. Approval, desire, pride. As you command, General. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. We hammered out initial deployment plans, established communication protocols, divided responsibilities. By the time the commanders filed out, my head was spinning with logistics and possibilities, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. Purpose. Real purpose. Not just surviving heartbreak, but actively building something, protecting something, mattering. Barrett paused on his way out, fixed me with those sharp old eyes. You remind me why I stayed in service all these years. Most commanders forget that war is about protecting life, not taking it. You remember. That's rare. That's precious. He left before I could respond. Garrett squeezed my shoulder as he passed. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. Then it was just Magnus and me in the war room. Maps spread between us like the future we were trying to build. You were magnificent, he said quietly. Watching you take command of that room, watching experienced warriors recognize your brilliance, I've never been more certain that the moon knew exactly what she was doing. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Don't. We have work to do. Romance later, war now. He grinned. Yes, General. Though for the record, appreciating your tactical genius and wanting to kiss you senseless are not mutually exclusive. Magnus. Fine, fine. He raised his hands in surrender. All business. Completely professional. Absolutely no thoughts about how attractive you look when you're outlining defensive strategies. Despite everything, I laughed. You're impossible. I'm patient, he corrected. There's a difference. Now about this territory tour, we should start with Northern Mountains, Barrett's region. Harshest terrain, most traditional pack. If we can win them over completely, the others will follow. The Northern Mountains pack made the Sinclairs look progressive. Their territory was brutal landscape of ice and stone, their people harder than both. They valued strength above all else, and they'd made their skepticism about a female general very clear in the messages that had arrived before we did. We rode into their territory 5 days after that first war council, accompanied by a small escort. Just enough for safety, not enough to seem like invasion. Magnus had wanted to bring a full battalion. I'd refused. This was about earning respect, not demanding it. The Northern Alpha met us at the territorial border. Ancient male named Kodiak, gray-haired and scarred, with eyes like winter itself. He looked me over with unconcealed doubt. "So you're the girl who thinks she can lead warriors." "I'm the general who will lead warriors," I corrected. "Whether you think I can is irrelevant. But if you'd like to test my capabilities, I'm happy to demonstrate." His eyebrows rose. "You want to fight me?" "I want to fight your best. Prove I'm not here on Magnus's authority alone. Prove I've earned command through skill, not politics." Magnus made a sound that might have been protest, but I shot him a look that said, "Trust me." He subsided, jaw tight, clearly hating this but respecting my decision. Kodiak's laugh was like stones grinding together. "Brave or stupid? We'll find out which. Our combat champion is female. Kira. If you can beat her, we'll listen to your strategy. If you can't, you can command elsewhere." "Fair terms." I met Magnus's eyes. "Don't interfere." His expression was pure alpha male frustration, but he nodded. "Your strategy. Your way." I promised. The combat circle was ancient stone, worn smooth by generations of challenges. The northern pack gathered to watch, hundreds of wolves in human and animal form, all skeptical, all waiting to see the soft southern female get destroyed by their champion. Kira entered the circle, and I revised my assessment of the situation, from difficult to potentially fatal. She was massive for a female, heavily muscled, with scars that told stories of dozens of victories. She moved like violence incarnate, and her eyes held the flat calculation of someone who'd killed before and would do so again without hesitation. "No killing blows," Kodiak announced. "First blood or submission. Begin." Kira attacked immediately. No hesitation. No testing. Pure aggression meant to overwhelm and intimidate. I'd expected that. Northern Pack valued direct assault, considered strategy a form of weakness. But I'd learned from Garrett that sometimes the appearance of weakness was the strongest strategy of all. I let her push me back, let her think she had me on the defensive, let her commit fully to the aggressive assault, burning energy, growing confident. Then I stopped retreating. She lunged. I sidestepped, used her momentum against her, sent her stumbling past. She recovered fast, came at me again. I was ready, met her strength with technique, her aggression with precision. We fought for 6 minutes that felt like hours. She was stronger. I was faster. She had reach. I had training that turned every advantage into liability. Garrett had taught me that superior size meant larger target area, that aggressive fighters left openings, that confidence could be exploited. I found my opening, swept her legs, followed her down, locked her in submission hold that would break her arm if she didn't yield. "Yield," I said quietly, "just for her. You fought well. No shame in submission to superior technique." For a moment I thought she'd force me to break her arm. Then she tapped out, and I released immediately, offered my hand to help her up. Kira took it, breathing hard, and something like respect flickered in her eyes. "You fight smart, not just strong. That's rare." The Northern Pack was silent, watching, waiting for Kodiak's judgment. The ancient Alpha circled the combat ring slowly, examined me with new eyes. "You're smaller than our warriors, weaker by raw strength, but you won. Want to know why that matters to me?" I waited. "Because war isn't about individual strength," he said. "It's about using what you have to defeat what they have. Morrison has more warriors than us, stronger fighters, better equipment. But if you can outthink them the way you outfought Kira, maybe we survive this." He turned to his pack. "General Sinclair has Northern Territory's full support, military and supply. We fight under her command." Relief flooded through me so intense it left me dizzy. I'd gambled everything on this challenge, and it had paid off. Magnus appeared at my side the moment Kodiak dismissed the gathering, pulled me close despite the watching crowd, his hands checking for injuries with desperate thoroughness. "Never do that to me again," he growled. "Watching you fight someone who could have killed you. Watching And not being able to interfere, that was torture. I had to earn their respect, I said. Had to prove I'm not hiding behind your authority. I know. His arms tightened around me. I know, and I'm proud, and I trust your tactical decisions. But God, Rowan, watching you in danger, feeling helpless, that's going to be the hardest part of this partnership. Get used to it, I said, but I softened it by leaning into him. I'm a warrior. Fighting is what I do. That night, Northern Pack threw a feast in our honor. Warriors who'd been skeptical hours ago now treated me with cautious respect. Kira sat beside me, sharing combat techniques, asking about my training. Kodiak told stories of the old territorial wars, and I listened carefully, filing away tactical lessons hidden in the narratives. Magnus watched me from across the fire, silver eyes reflecting flames, expression soft in a way I'd never seen before, like he was seeing his future and finding it good. Later, in the guest quarters they'd provided, he found me studying maps by candlelight. Couldn't sleep, I explained. Mind won't stop planning. He sat beside me, not touching, just present. Tell me what you're thinking. I traced the Morrison borders. They'll expect us to defend passively, dig in and wait for assault. Every defensive strategy in history follows that pattern. But you're not going to do that. No, I'm going to make them defend. Target their supply lines, hit their staging areas, force Thane to split his forces between offense and defense. Keep him off balance. Make him react instead of act. That's brilliant, Magnus said. Also dangerous. Requires small strike teams operating deep in enemy territory. I know. I looked at him. I'll need to lead some of those missions personally, to prove the strategy works, to earn continued trust from commanders who still doubt me. His jaw tightened. You're asking me to let you walk into enemy territory with minimal backup. I'm telling you what needs to happen for us to win. We sat in silence, the weight of 40 days hanging between us. 40 days to prepare for war that would determine the fate of 5 territories. 40 days where every decision mattered, every risk calculated, every moment precious. Rowan, he said quietly, I need you to understand something. I've commanded armies for 17 years, led warriors into battles that left battlefields soaked in blood, watched wolves under my command die despite my best tactical decisions, and I've done it all with the cold calculation necessary for leadership. He turned to face me fully. But you've changed everything. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I'm afraid. Not of dying. I've made peace with my mortality long ago. I'm afraid of losing you before we've had chance to explore what this bond means, before I've had chance to court you properly, before I've had chance to love you the way you deserve. Magnus, let me finish. His hand cupped my face, touched gentle despite the warrior calluses. I promised you military command, your strategy, your way. And I'll keep that promise because I respect your brilliance and trust your tactical mind. But I need you to know that every time you walk into danger, part of me will be screaming to protect you, to override your decisions and keep you safe. And I'll fight that instinct because I gave my word. But it will be the hardest battle I've ever fought. Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't ask for soft alpha who needs protecting. I asked for partner who trusts me to fight. I know, he said, and that's what you'll get. But partners also communicate. So I'm communicating that watching you in danger terrifies me. And I'll need your patience while I learn to handle that terror without letting it compromise my respect for your command. I leaned into his touch. Okay, that's fair. And I'll communicate that I'm still learning to trust again. To believe that someone can see my strength and not be threatened by it. To accept partnership without waiting for betrayal. We're both learning then, Magnus said. Learning to be what we've never been before. Equals, partners, mates who choose each other every day. He kissed me then, soft and sweet, and nothing like the desperate claiming after battle. This was promise. This was potential. This was the beginning of something neither of us fully understood yet, but both of us wanted desperately. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. 40 days until Morrison invades. 40 days of brutal preparation and impossible decisions and constant danger. But when the war is won, Rowan Sinclair, I'm taking you somewhere peaceful, somewhere with no maps, no strategy, no death. And I'm courting you properly, showing you what it means to be cherished, not just respected. Deal, I whispered, but first we win the war. First we win the war. The Eastern Forests territory was Darius Morrison's domain, and tension crackled through our escort as we approached the border. These were Morrison lands, ruled by the defector brother of our enemy. Trust was fragile here, tested daily by the reality of impending war with family. Darius met us at the forest edge, and I saw the strain on his face immediately. Dark circles under his eyes, new scars on his hands, the weight of commanding territory that half believed he was spy for his brother. "General Sinclair," he greeted me formally. "Alpha Ashford, thank you for coming. My people need to see that the alliance is real, that I haven't led them into trap." We rode into his territory in full view, making no attempt at stealth. This was statement. Trust given publicly, alliance affirmed before witnesses. The Eastern Wolves watched us with expressions ranging from hopeful to terrified. They'd lived under Thane Morrison's shadow for decades before Darius's defection. They knew what was coming, knew that war would hit their lands first and hardest. That night, Darius hosted council in his modest headquarters, not a fortress like Magnus's, just reinforced longhouse that served as command center. His officers gathered, and I recognized the same doubt I'd seen in Northern Territory, except here it was layered with fear. "Your brother," I said to Darius, addressing the elephant in the room directly. "Tell me about him. Not as enemy, as brother. What drives him? What does he fear?" "What?" Darius looked startled by the question, then thoughtful. "Thane fears irrelevance. Our father was brutal alpha who ruled through terror and strength. Thane grew up believing that power justified anything, that conquest was birthright, that mercy was weakness. And you disagreed." "I disagreed with methodology, not goal." Darius's voice was quiet. "I wanted Morrison pack strong and prosperous, but Thane's methods create enemies, not allies. He conquers and destroys instead of building sustainable power. 2 years ago, I realized he'd never change, that his path led to endless war. So I defected, took half the pack with me. Thane's never forgiven me." "Personal then," I said. "This war isn't just territorial ambition. It's brother trying to destroy brother." Darius nodded. "He'll hit Eastern Territory hardest, not just strategically, but emotionally. He wants to make example of me, prove that betrayal carries ultimate price." "Good," I said, and saw shock ripple through the room. "That's exploitable. Personal vendettas make commanders reckless. Emotional decisions override tactical sound ones. Your brother will overcommit to destroying you. We can use that." I moved to the maps. "Here's what I'm proposing. Eastern Territory becomes the bait. We make it look vulnerable. Thin defenses, obvious weaknesses. Thane won't be able to resist. He'll commit major forces to crushing his traitor brother." "You want to use my people as bait?" One of Darius's officers stood, face red with anger. "I want to use tactical deception to draw enemy forces into kill zone," I corrected. "Your people evacuate to secondary positions before main assault. We leave skeleton defense that retreats on schedule. Thane pursues, thinking he's winning. Walks into prepared ambush." The officer sat down slowly. "That could work." "It will work," I said. "But only if we sell it. Only if Morrison believes Eastern Territory is actually vulnerable, which means some of you will need to stay, maintain appearance of occupation, risk becoming casualties if timing goes wrong." Silence, heavy and terrible. "I'll stay," Darius said quietly. "This is my territory, my people, my brother. I won't ask anyone to take risks I won't share." "You're too valuable," Magnus objected. "If Morrison captures you—" "Then he captures me," Darius interrupted. "But General Sinclair is right. This strategy requires belief. And nothing sells vulnerability better than knowing the defector is still here, still within reach." I looked at him with new respect. This was courage. Not the flashy battlefield heroics, but the quiet willingness to sacrifice for strategic advantage. "We'll make it work," I promised. "Timing will be perfect. Defenses will hold just long enough. And when Morrison commits to Eastern Territory, he'll expose his real weakness. Supply lines." I showed them the intelligence I'd been gathering. Morrison's staging areas, his supply routes, the vulnerable points where small strike teams could do maximum damage. While Thane's focused on destroying his brother, we destroy his ability to sustain invasion, cut supply lines, burn storage depots, force him to choose between pressing attack and maintaining his army. One of the officers leaned forward. "That requires operating behind enemy lines, deep infiltration, high casualty risk." "I know. I met each pair of eyes in that room. I'll lead the first strike team myself. Prove the strategy before asking others to risk it. Magnus's hand tightened on my shoulder. We'll discuss that. We'll execute that, I corrected gently. This is military decision, not personal one. His jaw was tight, but he nodded. As you command, General. After the council dismissed, Magnus pulled me aside. His control was fraying, silver eyes stormed dark with emotion. You can't keep volunteering for suicide missions, he said, voice low and intense. You're a brilliant strategist. That brilliance is wasted if you die in some raid that any competent warrior could execute. Any competent warrior could execute it, I agreed. But troops follow leaders who share their risks, who prove strategies before ordering others to die for them. Northern Pack respects me because I fought their champion. Eastern Territory will respect me because I'll risk what I'm asking them to risk. I understand the logic, Magnus growled. That doesn't mean I have to like it. You don't have to like it, you just have to trust it. We stood in tense silence, the space between us charged with everything unsaid. Finally, Magnus exhaled slowly. 40 days ago, he said quietly. 40 days ago, I had clear tactical mind uncompromised by personal attachment. I made decisions based purely on strategic merit. I could send warriors to die without this constant terror eating me alive. And now? Now I'm compromised. Now every decision involving you requires fighting my instinct to protect, to override, to keep you safe regardless of strategic necessity. He pulled me closer, rested his forehead against mine. I don't regret claiming you. Don't regret this bond. But God, Rowan, learning to be your partner instead of your protector is the hardest thing I've ever done. Keep learning, I whispered, because I need partner, not protector. Need someone who trusts my strength even when it terrifies him. I'm trying. His arms tightened around me. Every day I'm trying. We made love that night with desperate intensity. Like we were trying to memorize each other before fate could tear us apart. Like we were sealing promises with our bodies that words couldn't quite capture. Afterward, wrapped in furs while rain drummed on the roof, Magnus traced patterns on my skin. Tell me about after, he murmured. After the war, after we win. What do you want? I thought about it seriously. The academy I mentioned. Training ground for all wolves, male and female. Where strength is celebrated regardless of gender. Where tactical thinking matters more than brute force. He smiled against my shoulder. You want to train the next generation. Someone has to. The old ways are dying. Traditional gender roles don't serve us anymore. We need warriors who think, diplomats who can fight, leaders who value intelligence over intimidation. You'll be magnificent at it, Magnus said. Already are. Every young female in 5 territories is talking about General Sinclair. The warrior who proved strength comes in forms beyond physical. What about you, I asked. After the war, what do you want? Peace, he said simply. Real peace. Not just absence of war, but presence of trust. Territories working together instead of constantly maneuvering for advantage, and a family. His hand splayed across my stomach. Children raised to value both strength and wisdom. To understand that true power comes from using force to protect, not dominate. I felt warmth bloom in my chest. How many children? He laughed quietly. However many you want, though I'm hoping for daughter first. Little girl with your tactical mind and stubborn spirit, she'll be unstoppable. And you'll spoil her rotten. Absolutely. His arms tightened around me. But first, the war. First, we survive the impossible and build the foundation for that future. First the war, I agreed. The next 3 weeks passed in blur of constant motion. We visited Southern Plains, where ancient Alpha Cedric shared wisdom from 40 years of military experience. Western Coast, where I negotiated with trade packs who valued profit over honor, but could be convinced that supporting us served their interests. Each territory brought new challenges, new skepticism to overcome, new respect to earn through demonstration and determination. And through it all, Magnus was there. Not hovering, not protecting, but present, supporting my decisions publicly while sharing his concerns privately, learning to trust my judgment even when it terrified him, growing into partnership instead of defaulting to dominance. We fought. God, we fought. Brutal arguments over strategy, over risk assessment, over the 1,000 tactical decisions that war demanded. But we fought fair, listened to each other, adjusted positions when confronted with superior logic, and slowly, day by day, the bond between us deepened. Not just mate bond, but warrior bond. Trust forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. 3 weeks before Morrison's invasion, we returned to Central Highlands for final preparation. The war room was crowded with commanders, territorial representatives, supply officers, everyone working toward single goal: survival. I stood at the map table, Magnus beside me, and laid out final defensive strategy. The 3-tier system, the supply line raids, the tactical deceptions designed to draw Morrison into kill zones while protecting civilians. Cross, the Southern commander who doubted me so strongly, spoke up. "General Sinclair, you've proven yourself tactically brilliant. You've earned our respect and our loyalty. But I need to ask directly, are you prepared for the casualties, the good wolves who'll die executing this strategy?" The question hit hard. I'd been avoiding thinking about it, focusing on tactical purity, on strategic elegance, on the intellectual beauty of a well-designed defense. But Cross was right. Wolves would die, maybe hundreds, and their blood would be on my hands. "No," I said honestly, "I'm not prepared. Can't be. Every casualty will haunt me. Every death will feel like personal failure. But the alternative is worse. Passive defense means Morrison rolls over us, thousands dead instead of hundreds, territories enslaved instead of protected." I met Cross's eyes. "So yes, I'll carry that weight. I'll mourn every warrior who falls. I'll visit their families and look them in the eyes and tell them their loved one's sacrifice mattered. And I'll do everything in my power to minimize those casualties while maximizing our chance of victory." Barrett nodded slowly. That's the answer of real commander. Not someone who sees warriors as chess pieces, but someone who understands that every piece represents life, family, future. The final days before invasion were a strange combination of frantic preparation and eerie calm. Everything that could be done had been done. Troops positioned, supplies cached, strategies rehearsed until they became instinct. Magnus found me on the ramparts the night before Morrison's forces were expected to arrive. I was watching the eastern horizon, where somewhere beyond sight, an army marched toward us with conquest in their hearts. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "Tomorrow," I agreed. He stood beside me, solid and warm. "Whatever happens, Rowan, whatever the outcome, I want you to know that these past weeks have been the best of my life. Finding you, fighting beside you, building something real together." "Don't," I said. "Don't talk like we're about to die." "We might be." He pulled me close. "War is unpredictable. Best strategies fail. Brilliant tactics collapse under chaos of actual combat. I need you to know, before battle, before uncertainty, that I love you." The words hit like lightning. We hadn't said it before. Hadn't crossed that line from partnership to vulnerability. "Magnus, you don't have to say it back," he continued. "I know you're still healing, still learning to trust, but I needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, you are loved. Completely, unconditionally, not despite your strength, but because of it." Tears blurred my vision. "I love you too," I whispered. "Didn't want to, wasn't ready, but I do. You've shown me what real partnership looks like, what it means to be seen and valued and trusted completely." He kissed me then, deep and claiming and tender all at once. And standing on those ramparts under rising moon, with war coming at dawn, I felt something settle in my chest. This was worth fighting for. This bond, this partnership, this future we were building together. Tomorrow, we'd face impossible odds. Tomorrow, wolves would die and blood would soak contested ground. Tomorrow, everything we'd built would be tested in fire and violence. But tonight, we had this moment, this certainty, this love that had grown from ashes of heartbreak into something stronger than either of us alone. "I'm ready," I told him, "for battle, for war, for whatever comes." "We're ready," he corrected. "Together, always together." The moon rose higher, painting the world in silver. In the distance, campfires marked Morrison positions. 2,500 warriors preparing to crush us. Overwhelming force against desperate defense. But we had something they didn't. We had strategy. We had purpose. We had love worth fighting for and future worth dying to protect. And we had each other. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, standing on these ramparts with my mate beside me, I felt invincible. Not because I couldn't die, but because I'd finally found something worth living for. Worth fighting for with everything I had. Worth becoming the warrior I'd always been meant to be. Dawn broke blood red over the eastern horizon, and with it came the sound that would haunt my dreams for years to come. War drums, deep and rhythmic and relentless. The beat of Morrison forces announcing their arrival like thunder promising storm. I stood on the ramparts of Central Highlands Fortress, Magnus beside me, and watched the enemy army emerge from the forest like a dark tide. 2,500 warriors in organized columns, moving with the precision of well-trained forces. Thane Morrison had brought his full strength, and the sight of it was enough to make even experienced commanders go pale. Barrett joined us, his weathered face grim. Never seen Morrison commit this many forces at once. He's not planning siege, he's planning annihilation. Let him try, I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. We're ready. The first day of battle tested everything we'd prepared. Morrison forces hit our outer defensive line at 3 points simultaneously, just as I'd predicted. But Thane had learned from the Blood Moon attack. His warriors were disciplined, organized, following tactical doctrine instead of relying on shock and terror. I commanded from the central watchtower, elevated position that gave me sightlines across the battlefield. Magnus led our mobile reserve, ready to reinforce any position that weakened. We drilled this coordination for weeks, but theory and practice were different animals. The outer line held for 2 hours. Our skirmishers harassed Morrison flanks, bleeding their numbers, slowing their advance, exactly as planned. But the casualties were mounting faster than I'd calculated. Good wolves dying to buy us time and tactical advantage. General, Eastern position requests reinforcement, a runner reported, breathless from sprint up the tower stairs. They're holding but barely. I studied the battlefield map, mind processing a dozen variables simultaneously. Morrison was pushing hardest on the east, trying to break through toward Darius's territory. Personal vendetta overriding tactical sense, exactly as I'd hoped. Tell Eastern Commander to execute planned retreat, I ordered. Fall back to secondary positions. Make it look desperate. I want Morrison thinking he's winning. The runner hesitated. Ma'am, if we retreat now, that's an order. I met his eyes. Trust the strategy. He ran. I watched the Eastern line begin its withdrawal, organized but appearing panicked. Morrison forces surged forward in pursuit, scenting victory, and walked straight into the killing ground we'd prepared. Archers hidden in elevated positions. Concealed pits. Terrain that channeled attackers into narrow corridors where numbers became liability instead of asset. Morrison lost 200 warriors in 15 minutes, and their advance stalled. But they didn't break. Thane rallied his forces, adjusted tactics, and pressed forward with grim determination. This male had been planning conquest for years. He wasn't going to fold after one setback. By sunset of the first day, we'd held all 3 defensive lines, but the cost had been brutal. 68 of our warriors dead, twice that many wounded. The field hospitals were overwhelmed, and the sounds of injured wolves crying out in pain cut through the victory of successful defense. I visited every hospital tent that night, looked into the eyes of wounded warriors and thanked them personally, held the hand of a young male from Northern Territory as he died, whispering that his sacrifice mattered, that his pack would remember his courage. Magnus found me outside the last tent, sitting in the dark with blood on my hands and tears streaming down my face. 68, I whispered. 68 dead because of my strategy. He sat beside me, pulled me close. 68 dead instead of 600. Your strategy saved lives, Rowan. Doesn't make it hurt less, but it's truth nonetheless. How do you bear it? I asked. Years of command. How do you carry the weight of all those deaths? You don't, he said quietly. You carry them. Every single one. Remember their faces, speak their names, honor their sacrifice, and you keep fighting because the alternative is letting their deaths mean nothing. We sat in silence, holding each other while the camp settled into uneasy sleep. Tomorrow would bring more death, more sacrifice, more impossible choices. But tonight, we had this moment, this shared grief, this understanding that leadership meant carrying unbearable weight with grace. The second day began with Morrison switching tactics. Instead of direct assault, they encircled our positions and settled into siege formation, cutting off supply routes, establishing their own fortified camps, preparing for long campaign of attrition. They think they can starve us out, Lydia Chen observed during morning war council. Classic siege doctrine. They have superior numbers and can afford to wait. Good, I said, studying the maps. Let them think we're trapped. Let them settle in and get comfortable. Meanwhile, we execute Phase 2. Phase 2 was the dangerous part. Small strike teams infiltrating behind Morrison lines to hit supply depots and communication networks. Guerrilla warfare designed to make Thane defend his rear while maintaining forward siege. I'm leading the first team, I announced, and felt Magnus stiffen beside me. "We've discussed this," he said carefully. "No, you objected and I overruled. This is my strategy. I prove it works before asking others to die for it." "General Sinclair," Cross spoke up. "With respect, you're too valuable to risk on raid. Let experienced infiltration specialists handle it." I shook my head. "Troops follow leaders who share their risks. I go first, or the strategy loses credibility." Magnus was silent for a long moment, jaw tight with suppressed argument. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." "No," I said. "You're needed here to command overall defense. This requires small team, fast and quiet. Your presence would compromise stealth." His eyes met mine, storm dark with barely controlled emotion. "You're asking me to stay safe while you walk into enemy territory with minimal backup. You're asking me to trust strategy over instinct, to honor your command while every fiber of my being screams to protect you." "Yes," I said softly. "That's exactly what I'm asking." The room was silent, every commander watching to see how this would play out, whether the alpha of alphas would override his mate's military decision. Magnus stood, walked to the window, stared out at Morrison siege lines. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Your strategy, your way. I gave my word." He turned back to face me. "But you take Garrett with you, and Darius. They know the terrain, and they're expendable if things go wrong." Darius flinched at expendable, but not at acceptance. "I'll keep her alive, Alpha Ashford." "See that you do," Magnus said quietly, and the threat beneath those words was unmistakable. We left at midnight, small team of 5 including Garrett, Darius, and 2 northern warriors who specialized in stealth operations. The moon was dark, providing cover as we slipped through Morrison siege lines, using paths Darius had mapped from his years serving under his brother. The enemy camp was massive. Hundreds of fires, thousands of warriors. We moved through shadows like ghosts, every sense heightened, every step calculated. One mistake would mean death, not just for us, but for everyone depending on this strategy to work. Darius led us to the main supply depot, guarded but not heavily. Thane was confident in his siege, hadn't expected us to risk offensive operations. His arrogance was exploitable weakness. We worked fast. Oil on stored grain, torches to ammunition stores, fires that would burn slow at first, then explode into inferno. By the time Morrison sentries noticed, we were gone, melting back into darkness while chaos erupted behind us. The return journey was harder. Morrison forces were alert now, searching for saboteurs. We had to take longer route, moving through terrain so treacherous that one northern warrior fell, breaking his leg. We couldn't leave him, couldn't let him be captured. Garrett and I carried him while Darius and the other warrior provided cover. Every minute felt like hour. Every sound seemed magnified. My heart hammered so hard I was sure enemy scouts could hear it. We made it back to our lines just before dawn, exhausted and filthy but alive. The northern warrior's leg was badly broken. He'd never fight again, but he was breathing, and in war, that counted as victory. Magnus met us at the gates, pulled me into his arms without words, just holding me like he was confirming I was real, solid, safe. His whole body was trembling. "Never again," he whispered against my hair. "I can't do that again, sitting here helpless while you're in danger. It's killing me, Rowan." "I know," I murmured. But it worked. Morrison lost supply depot. More importantly, Thane knows we can hit him behind his lines. He'll have to divert forces to guard his rear. "I don't care," Magnus said, voice breaking. "I don't care about tactical advantage if the price is your life." "Then you care about me more than the thousands depending on us to win," I said gently. "And I love you for it. But you have to trust me to do my job." He pulled back, eyes searching mine. "I do trust you. That's what makes this so hard. I trust your brilliance, your courage, your tactical genius. But trust doesn't make fear disappear." The next 2 weeks fell into brutal rhythm. Morrison pressed siege during day. We launched raids at night. Slowly, incrementally, we bled their numbers and their morale. Thane's supply situation grew desperate. His warriors started deserting. The confidence of early days eroded into grim determination to salvage something from failing campaign. But we paid for every advantage. More casualties, more funerals, more nights where I woke from nightmares of dying warriors calling my name. Magnus was constant presence through it all, supporting my decisions publicly while sharing his fears privately, learning to function as partner instead of protector, even though it cost him sleep and peace, and probably years off his life from stress. 3 weeks into siege, intelligence reported Thane preparing major assault. One final push to break our defenses before his army collapsed from supply shortage and low morale. Everything was coming to head. "This is it," I told the War Council. "He'll commit everything he has left. Probably 1,500 warriors. If we hold, he's finished. If we break, he wins." "And if we counter-assault while he's committed?" Barrett asked. "Hit him while he's vulnerable?" I'd been thinking the same thing. Siege doctrine said defenders stayed defensive, but Morrison expected siege doctrine, expected us to hunker down and absorb his attack. What if we didn't? What if we met his assault head-on, then pushed through, turned his final attack into his final defeat? "It's risky," Cross said. "We'd be abandoning fortified positions, fighting in open field where his numbers matter more. But his forces are exhausted, demoralized, undersupplied," I countered. "Ours are defending home territory, fighting for families. Psychological advantage matters as much as tactical position." Magnus was watching me with something like awe. "You want to end this. Not just survive it, but end it decisively." "War doesn't end until one side can't fight anymore," I said. "We can bleed Morrison slowly over months, watch more of our warriors die in attrition, or we can finish this now, in single decisive engagement." Silence fell over the war room, every commander understanding what I was proposing. Total commitment, everything on single battle. Win or lose, live or die, all decided in one brutal afternoon. "I support General Sinclair's strategy," Lydia said quietly. "Prolonged siege favors Morrison's numbers. Quick, decisive victory favors our preparation and morale." One by one, the other commanders voiced agreement. Even Cross, the skeptic, nodded acceptance. Magnus was last to speak. "As alpha of alphas, I authorize this strategy. As your mate, I'm terrified. But as warrior who's fought beside you, I trust your tactical judgment completely." He met my eyes across the map table. "End this, Rowan. Bring our people home." Morrison's final assault came at dawn 3 days later. 1,500 warriors in massed formation, war drums beating, Thane Morrison himself leading from the front. They hit our outer defenses like avalanche, overwhelming through sheer numbers and desperate fury. Our forces held the line for 20 minutes. Then, on my signal, they broke. Not collapsed, not routed. Executed controlled retreat that looked panicked, but was actually precision tactical maneuver, drawing Morrison forces forward, stretching their formation, making them commit fully to pursuit. Thane took the bait, saw our warriors fleeing and assumed he'd broken us, pushed his entire force forward in pursuit, abandoning defensive discipline in eagerness for final victory, and walked into the killing field we'd prepared. I led the counter-assault personally. Magnus beside me, Barrett and Garrett flanking, every commander who doubted me now fighting as unified force. We hit Morrison's exposed flank like hammer blow, driving deep into their formation, cutting them off from retreat. The battle was chaos, blood and tooth and claw and desperate violence. I fought like something unleashed. Every skill Garrett had taught me, every tactical principle my father had drilled into me, all channeled into pure warrior focus. A Morrison warrior lunged for me. I sidestepped, used his momentum to throw him into another attacker. Shifted mid-combat, my wolf faster and more vicious than human form. Tore through enemies with singular purpose. Protect the pack, win the war, survive. Magnus fought beside me like extension of my own body. The mate bond let us coordinate without words, anticipate each other's moves, function as single deadly unit. Where I was speed and tactics, he was power and experience. Together, we were unstoppable. I saw Thane Morrison across the battlefield, massive male covered in scars and other wolves' blood, fighting his way toward Darius with single-minded fury. Brother seeking brother, betrayal seeking vengeance. Darius met him in the center of the fighting, and I felt time slow. Watched two brothers collide with all the weight of family history and territorial politics and personal grudges carried for years. They fought savagely. Thane was larger, stronger, but Darius fought with desperation of someone defending choice to leave, to be better, to build instead of destroy. The battle raged around them, but that fight became focal point, symbol of everything this war represented. Old brutal ways against new possibility, conquest against cooperation, hatred against hope. Darius won, barely. Thane went down with throat torn, and I saw the moment he realized he was dying. Saw him look at his brother with something that might have been regret, or might have been just surprise that betrayal could succeed. Morrison forces saw their leader fall, and something broke in them. The organized assault dissolved into panicked retreat. Our warriors pursued, cutting down enemies who'd come to conquer, until Magnus called halt and our disciplined forces stopped despite battle fury demanding more blood. The Battle of Highland Pass, they'd call it later. The engagement that ended Morrison's invasion and established new order in the territories. Historians would analyze tactics. Strategists would study the defensive coordination. Military academies would teach the campaign as example of how brilliant strategy could overcome superior numbers. But in the moment, all I felt was exhaustion and grief, and overwhelming relief that it was over. We'd won, paid terrible price, but won. The battlefield was carnage, bodies everywhere, ours and theirs. Morrison had lost over 1,000 warriors. We'd lost 400. 400 wolves who'd trusted my strategy, followed my orders, died believing they were protecting something worth dying for. I walked among the fallen, speaking names when I knew them, touching hands, whispering promises that their sacrifice would be remembered. Magnus walked beside me, silent support while I performed this awful duty. Barrett found me kneeling beside young female from Northern Territory, barely 20 years old, dead from wounds that should have been survivable if we'd had better medical support. "General Sinclair," he said quietly, "you need to address the troops. They need to hear from you." "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "How do I tell them victory when so many are dead?" "You tell them truth," Barrett said, "that they fought brilliantly, that their fallen comrades died protecting home and family, that what we built here today matters. You tell them what real leadership sounds like." I stood on the ridge overlooking the battlefield, with Magnus beside me and commanders arrayed behind me, and I looked out at the assembled forces, wolves from 5 territories, bloodied and exhausted, waiting to hear whether their sacrifices had meaning. "Warriors of the Northern Alliance," I began, and my voice carried across sudden silence. "Today, we won. Morrison forces are broken. The invasion is ended. Your homes are safe. Your families are protected." I paused, gathering strength, but victory came at terrible cost. 400 of our brothers and sisters fell today, 400 brave souls who trusted me to lead them wisely and well. I'm standing here and they're not, and that's weight I'll carry rest of my life. The assembled warriors were absolutely still, listening. "I can't tell you their deaths were easy or painless or anything but tragic," I continued. "I can't make that grief lighter. But I can promise you this. They died protecting something real, something worth fighting for. They died so that our territories could build future based on cooperation instead of conquest, protection instead of domination, honor instead of fear." I looked across the faces, young and old, male and female, wolves from different packs who'd learned to fight as unified force. "What we built in these weeks wasn't just military alliance," I said. "It was proof that different territories can work together, that old prejudices can be overcome, that brilliant strategy matters more than brute force, that females can lead armies and males can trust that leadership. That strength comes in many forms, and all of them are valuable." My voice strengthened. Morrison came here expecting easy conquest, expected us to fold because we were smaller, weaker, less numerous. They underestimated us, and that underestimation cost them everything. Cheers started rippling through the crowd. "But we will not become them," I said, and silence fell again. "We will not take Morrison territory through conquest. We will offer their people choice. Join our alliance as equals, or rebuild independently with our support. Because we fight to protect, not to dominate. We lead through respect, not through fear." I looked at Magnus, then back at the warriors. "This victory belongs to all of you. Every warrior who held the line, every scout who gathered intelligence, every supply officer who kept us fed, every healer who saved lives. You are heroes, you are legends, and you are the foundation of everything we'll build going forward." The cheering this time was deafening. Wolves howling victory, humans shouting approval, the sound of people who'd survived impossible odds and emerged stronger. Magnus pulled me close, whispered in my ear, "You're magnificent, born for this. Leading armies, inspiring warriors, changing the world." "I just want it to be over," I whispered back. "Want to bury our dead and heal our wounded and never see another battlefield." "Soon," he promised, "soon." The formal mating ceremony took place 1 month after the battle. We'd delayed, wanting to honor the fallen properly, to ensure the wounded were healing, to establish the new territorial alliance on solid foundation before celebrating personal victory. But finally, Magnus insisted, pointed out that we'd completed the mate bond in private but never made it official before witnesses, that the territories needed celebration after so much grief, that we'd earned this joy. The ceremony was held at the same sacred clearing where everything had started, but the energy was completely different. No forced alliance, no political maneuvering, just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, choosing to formalize their bond before the communities they'd led through war. Seren stood beside me as honor attendant, radiant with her own happiness. She and Declan had mated quietly 2 weeks ago, and the peace in her eyes told me she'd found what she'd been searching for all along. My father gave me away with tears streaming down his face, pride and joy and relief all mixed together. Rowan Sinclair, who'd lost so much through choosing honor over advantage, seeing his difficult daughter claim everything he'd hoped for her and more. Magnus waited at the ritual circle, and he looked like something from legend. Highland formal wear, commander's bearing, but eyes soft with love and anticipation. The alpha of alphas, who ruled 5 territories with iron discipline, waiting for me like I was the only thing that mattered in entire world. The officiant spoke traditional words about bonds and destiny. We exchanged warrior vows, swords instead of rings, promises built on partnership and respect instead of obedience and submission. I vow to fight beside you through every battle, Magnus said, to trust your strategy even when it terrifies me, to honor your strength and celebrate your brilliance, to be your partner, your equal, your home. I vow to lead with wisdom and love with courage, I responded, to trust your support and value your counsel, to build future worthy of the sacrifices we've made, to be your general and your mate, your warrior and your heart. We sealed the vows with blood mixing, ancient ritual that bound our lives together before moon and witnesses. And when the officiant declared us formally mated, the clearing erupted in celebration that lasted 3 full days. All 5 territories attending, wolves from northern mountains bringing ice wine, southern plains bringing harvest plenty, eastern forests bringing hope and renewal, western coast bringing trade goods and prosperity, central highlands providing the venue and the couple at center of it all. It was more than wedding. It was celebration of survival, affirmation of new alliance built through shared sacrifice instead of forced agreement, declaration that the future would be different, better, built on cooperation instead of conquest. Finn attended with Seren, having eventually married her in quiet ceremony after the war ended. He approached me during the second day of celebration, looking older and sadder than I remembered. "I wanted to congratulate you," he said quietly, "and apologize again. I made terrible choice 3 years ago, threw away something precious because I was afraid and weak. You deserved better." "I did," I agreed, "but I found better. Found partner who values my strength instead of fearing it. Found purpose beyond being someone's convenient mate. Found myself." "I'm glad," Finn said, and I heard genuine sincerity in his voice. "Truly, what you've built here, what you've become, it's extraordinary. I'm sorry I couldn't see it then." "I forgive you," I said, "not because you deserve it, but because carrying anger doesn't serve me. You taught me important lesson, Finn. You taught me that wrong mate at wrong time can redirect us toward right path." He nodded, accepted the dismissal with grace, and walked away. Last conversation we'd ever have. Last moment where he mattered at all to my story. The ancient moon priestess appeared on the 3rd day, blind and ancient and somehow ageless. She moved through the crowd like reality bent around her, and when she reached Magnus and me, she smiled with secrets in her expression. "The moon corrected her mistake," she said. "Sometimes souls are tested through pain before they're ready for their true destiny. You, child, needed to learn your worth before you could accept being valued. You needed to become warrior before you could lead warriors." She touched my stomach with gnarled hand, and I felt warmth spread through me. "Your first daughter will be greatest general our kind has known, fierce and brilliant, born to lead. Your second child will unite wolf and human worlds, bridge ancient divide, and your third—" She trailed off, smile turning mysterious. "What about the third?" Magnus asked. "The third will surprise you both," she said cryptically. "The moon has plans you cannot imagine yet." She gifted us silver pendant, ancient thing covered in symbols I didn't recognize. "For protection," she said. for blessing, for the future you're building together. Then she disappeared as mysteriously as she'd come, leaving us standing with more questions than answers. 6 months after the war ended, I stood on the training grounds of the newly established Northern Alliance Military Academy. Young wolves from all 5 territories gathered to learn combat, strategy, leadership. Males and females training side by side, traditional and progressive approaches blending into something new. This was my dream made real. Training ground where strength was celebrated regardless of gender, where tactical thinking mattered more than brute force, where the next generation learned to lead through respect instead of fear. Barrett taught advanced strategy. Lydia handled logistics and supply chain management. Cross covered traditional combat forms. Darius taught infiltration and intelligence gathering, and I coordinated it all, building curriculum that honored the old ways while embracing necessary change. Magnus handled the political side. Governing 5 territories was full-time job, mediating disputes, allocating resources, maintaining the alliance we'd forged through blood and sacrifice. But he made time every day to find me, to check in, to remind me that I was more than my achievements. We'd started talking about children. Not immediately, but soon. Wanted to establish the academy first, make sure it could survive without my constant presence. But the future we'd planned during the war was becoming real, tangible, possible. One evening, Magnus found me reviewing tactical proposals from academy students. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, rested his chin on my shoulder. "Come to bed," he murmured. "The proposals will still be there tomorrow." "Just 5 more minutes," I said, not looking up. "You said that an hour ago." He turned me in his arms, made me meet his eyes. "The war is over, Rowan. You don't have to push so hard anymore." "I know," I said, "but I want this to last. Want what we built to survive long after we're gone." "It will," Magnus promised, "because it's built on real foundation. Shared sacrifice, mutual respect, vision of better future. That doesn't crumble just because you take evening off." He was right. I knew he was right. But letting go of constant vigilance was harder than I'd expected. War had taught me that relaxation could mean death, that the moment you stopped preparing was the moment you lost. "I'm trying," I told him, "trying to believe we're safe, that the threat is really over, that I can be more than warrior and general." "You can be anything you want," Magnus said, "general and mate and future mother and academy director and anything else that makes you happy. But you can also be woman who takes evening to make love to her husband and sleep in late and forget about tactical proposals for few hours." Husband. The word still sent warmth through me. We'd been formally mated for 6 months, but the novelty of belonging to someone who celebrated rather than constrained me hadn't worn off. "Bed then," I agreed. "But if territory comes under attack in the night, I'm blaming you for distracting me from preparations." "If territory comes under attack in the night, we'll face it together," Magnus said, "like we face everything. Partners, equals, mates." We made love slowly that night. Not the desperate claiming of wartime, but the gentle exploration of people who had time to savor each other. Afterward, wrapped in furs while firelight danced on stone walls, Magnus traced patterns on my skin. "Happy?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. Didn't think I could be after everything. After Finn, after heartbreak, after all the death and sacrifice, but I am, completely. "Good," he pulled me closer, "because you deserve happiness, deserve peace, deserve everything you've built and more." "What about you?" I asked. "Happy?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Magnus said. "I spent 17 years as alpha of alphas, powerful and respected and utterly alone. Then you crashed into my life like fate incarnate, brilliant and fierce and absolutely unwilling to be anything less than my equal. You changed everything, Rowan. Made me better, made me whole." "We both changed," I said. "I was broken female running from pain when we met. You saw past the damage to the warrior underneath. Gave me purpose and partnership and love I didn't believe existed." "Best decision I ever made," Magnus murmured. "Kneeling before you in that clearing, claiming you as mate and general, trusting you to lead my armies and steal my heart. Best decision I ever made was saying yes." We fell asleep wrapped around each other, safe and warm and absolutely certain that we'd found what we'd been searching for all along. 5 years later, I stood in the same sacred clearing, watching my daughter Storm take her first steps. She was 3 years old, fierce and fearless, with Magnus's silver eyes and my tactical mind already showing in how she approached every problem. Magnus knelt beside her, encouraging her with gentle patience that would have shocked anyone who'd only seen him in alpha mode. But I knew both versions of him, the powerful ruler and the tender father, the warrior and the mate, the alpha and the partner. Storm took 3 running steps, stumbled, fell, immediately tried again with determination that made me laugh. She was definitely our daughter, stubborn and brilliant and absolutely convinced she could do anything. Our second child was due in 4 months. We didn't know gender yet, but the moon priestess's prophecy suggested son, the one who would bridge wolf and human worlds. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I trusted that the moon had plan. Saren approached with Declan and their 2 children. My sister had found her happiness too. Quieter than mine, gentler, but no less real. She taught at the academy now, specialized in diplomacy and conflict resolution, showing young wolves that strength came in many forms. Finn had moved to distant territory, remarried, had children of his own. I heard about him occasionally through pack networks, but he was irrelevant to my life now. Distant memory of person I'd been before I became who I was meant to be. My father had passed 2 years ago, peacefully in sleep with mother beside him. But before he died, he'd told me he was proud, that watching me become general, lead armies, change the world had been greatest joy of his life. That refusing dishonorable alliance all those years ago had been worth it because it taught me to value honor over advantage. I carried his lessons with me, carried all the lessons from everyone who'd shaped me. Garrett still taught at the academy at 70 years old, passing wisdom to new generations. Barrett had retired but consulted on complex tactical problems. The commanders who doubted me were now my closest advisors, respect earned through competence and proven in battle. The Northern Alliance thrived, 5 territories working together, prospering together, building future based on cooperation instead of conquest. Young wolves grew up seeing females in command positions, males comfortable with powerful mates, traditions evolving to serve people instead of constraining them. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. We still had disputes, still had wolves who clung to old prejudices, still had challenges to face, but we faced them together, as alliance, as family. Storm ran to me, grabbed my legs, looked up with Magnus's silver eyes shining. "Mama, watch, I can run fast." "I know, sweetheart," I said, picking her up. "You're fastest runner in whole territory." "Fastest warrior," she corrected seriously. "When I grow up, I'm going to be general like you." Magnus joined us, wrapped his arms around both of us. "You can be anything you want to be," he told Storm. "General or diplomat or healer or anything else that makes you happy. But if you choose warrior path," I added, "remember that real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting what matters, fighting for purpose, not glory, leading with wisdom, not just courage." Storm nodded solemnly, processing this with intensity that made me smile. She was so young, but already I could see the leader she'd become, the warrior who'd make her own path, the person who'd change the world in ways I couldn't imagine yet. The moon rose over the clearing, full and bright, not blood red like the night everything changed, but silver and peaceful. Blessing over celebration instead of transformation. Witness to happiness earned through sacrifice and courage. I looked at Magnus, at our daughter, at the life we'd built together. Thought about the broken female I'd been 5 years ago, standing in ruins watching her mate reject her. Thought about the warrior I'd become through pain and purpose. Thought about the future stretching ahead, full of possibility. Sometimes the universe breaks us open, I thought, not to destroy us, but to remake us into something stronger. Sometimes what feels like worst betrayal is actually gift in disguise, redirecting us toward better future than we'd imagined. Finn's rejection had been necessary, had taught me my worth, had made me into someone strong enough to accept Magnus's partnership when it appeared, had forged me into general who could lead armies and mother who could raise warriors. And standing here now, with mate who valued my strength and daughter who'd never doubt her worth and life built on foundation of real respect and partnership, I was grateful. Grateful for the pain that taught me wisdom. Grateful for the war that proved my capabilities. Grateful for every impossible challenge that made me into who I was meant to be. My name is Rowan Ashford, General of the Northern Alliance, mate to the Alpha of Alphas, mother to future leaders, and I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. The journey from heartbreak to happiness hadn't been easy, had required courage I didn't know I possessed, had demanded I become warrior before I could become whole. But standing here in moonlight with my family, with the territories I'd helped save, with the future I'd fought to build, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. I was worth fighting for, worth the struggle, worth every sacrifice and challenge and impossible choice. And any woman listening to this story, any person who's been rejected or betrayed or told they weren't enough, I want you to know something. Your story isn't over. That closed door isn't the ending. That person who rejected you isn't the final word on your worth. Somewhere out there is a partner who will celebrate your strength instead of fearing it. Purpose that needs exactly your gifts. Future you can't imagine yet, but that's waiting for you to be brave enough to reach for it. Choose courage. Choose yourself. Choose the fight worth fighting. The blood moon rises for all of us eventually. The question is whether we'll be ready to claim our destiny when it does. I was ready. And because I was ready, I found everything I'd been searching for. You will too. I promise you will too. Just keep fighting. Keep choosing yourself. Keep believing that your strength is gift, not burden. And when your moment comes, when your destiny reveals itself, step into it with courage. Because you, like me, are worth everything. The moon shines for us all.